The PlayStation 1, a console that brought us countless classics, many of which are still revered today. But for every Final Fantasy VII, there were lesser known games that tried to catch the same lightning in a bottle. One such game was Shadow Madness. And in today's video, I want to talk all about Shadow Madness because low-key, I kind of dig the game. So with that all being said, what is up guys, Jen here, hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to the channel. As always, got your recorded timestamps down below, so if you want to skip to a certain section, feel free to do so. All I ask is you to support the channel and hit the like button, and if you want to stick around for some more RPG content, then please consider hitting that subscribe button. So Shadow Madness, I'm going to start off with the question of, have you heard of this game? Have you played the game? If you have, please let me know your thoughts down below. If you haven't, hopefully this video might give you a bit of an insight what to expect if you do decide to go down that route. Now, I'll give you a little bit of backstory. Why are we making this video? Of course, I'm tying it to Final Fantasy VII because it truly did try to be Final Fantasy VII, but at the same time, when I first experienced Final Fantasy VII and before I moved on to Final Fantasy VIII, I still wanted to play Final Fantasy VII, but I did everything I wanted to do. So I was looking all over the place for a game to play that was like Final Fantasy VII, and I came across Shadow Madness in a bargain bin in a game station, I think, back in the day, and it was pretty cheap. I looked on the back of the box. We had the good old polygon models, the pre-rendered backgrounds. It ticked my boxes. It had 2 discs, so I thought, you know what, we're going all in, we're taking it home. And in a nutshell, I really enjoyed my experience with Shadow Madness, but it is a game that people don't really like. They think it's a poor man's Final Fantasy VII. I guess on the surface it is, but let's dive in a little bit deeper and see what it's all about. Now, Shadow Madness was released in 1999. It was an RPG developed by Crave Entertainment and published by Eidos Interactive. Now, at first glance, it might just seem like another attempt to capitalize on the success of Final Fantasy VII, and to certain extents it did. Final Fantasy VII opened a lot of doors to RPG, but how does Shadow Madness actually stack up? I'm going to do what I usually do and set the scene. I'm going to read you the synopsis of the box art to get you ready for what Shadow Madness is all about. The fantastic world of Arcos is under siege. Chaos reigns as a mysterious plague known as the Shadow Madness ravages the land. With no known cure, it strikes without warning, leaving behind vile creatures and piles of dust everywhere its victims once stood. As the one hope to this doomed land, you must stop this scourge before it stops you. So essentially, bad thing comes to the world, you need to defeat the bad thing. Very basic plot, but this is a real in-depth game if you give it the time. It has the story as you go from point A to B and traverse through the game, but if you take the time to talk to its NPCs and read the books, there's a whole part of the game where there's a library of just full of books, full of lore of the world before things happened, before the game even starts. It's incredible how much is in here, and I don't want to spoil too much, and to be quite frank, there's so much in there I can't remember all of it, but at its basis, you play as a character named Stinger, of all things, and you meet very many characters along the way. A woman named Winleaf and a robot called Harv 5. I know, it's crazy and it's like a scarecrow robot type thing, but the fact that this is so well written, it's not even a Japanese RPG. I should have pointed that out to begin with. This is made by a Western studio led by a guy called Ted Plosey, who was a lead localizer for the Final Fantasy games back on the SNES and probably leading up to Final Fantasy VII. So the way that the text is written and the way it's presented will feel like it's very well localized from a Japanese translation, but in matter of fact, it is just an English written script and it's written incredibly well. So that's about everything for story. I want to talk about the gameplay of Shadow Madness because it's pretty unique when it comes to the way it handles exploration and its combat. So exploration, it will feel like you are playing Final Fantasy VII. You have these pre-rendered backgrounds. They are not as good as Final Fantasy VII. They are Very, very basic, but do the job from getting you from A to B. There are items littered everywhere. You can go into your menu by pressing triangle, square, or circle, but it goes into each individual thing. So I think triangle's items, circle's magic, square is something else. Don't quote me on that, but the way that you just traverse the world is very bare bones and much akin to Final Fantasy VII. There are many NPCs, like I've mentioned, to interact with that will give you lore. Apart from that, there's not too much more to the exploration. There is a very unique thing that it does with the discs. Usually when you play a game, let's say Final Fantasy VII, you get to a new disc, you're leaving disc 1 behind, you're never going back to it. But there's a certain point in Shadow Madness where you visit like the underworld. You have to use a vehicle to traverse to another part of the world, and this entire world is on that disc. And if you want to return to the world that you started out on, you need to switch the discs back. So when you do the prompt to do it, so like, do you want to return to the surface, for example, you click yes, and it's like you need to put in disc 1 again. You want to go back to the underground, you need to go and put in disc 2. So it's very unique in how it presents it, and it's also really unique the way it presents its world map. I kind of really like it because it is a map. It's just a map. You are traversing over a map, and it gives it a sense of scale. But not only that, there are certain points of this map where you can interact, and it gives you more lore about the world. So you're rewarded for your curiosity. Sometimes there might be an item, and again, sometimes there might be a little bit of world lore. So let's shift over to the combat of Shadow Madness. And this, the footage you've probably seen is looking real clunky. And yes, it is pretty clunky looking back on it now. But I really like this combat. But before we talk about the actual combat, let's talk about going into combat. You can avoid all random battles. So essentially what will happen is you'll be traversing from A to B, and you'll hear a scream, a growl of a monster. As soon as you hear that, you hit the R1 button or one of the shoulder buttons, and you duck down. If you press it at the right time, you avoid that encounter. So you can use that to your advantage, or you can just completely ignore it and get into every single battle that you come across. Now, the combat itself, very bare bones. The way it presents itself is that there's not really like an ATB system like Final Fantasy VII. It's just like if you're ready to attack, you can attack. The enemy's ready to attack, the enemy will attack. You could attack each other at the same time. It's quite fast but slow at the same time. Hopefully the footage is reflecting what I'm saying to a certain extent, but it's very basic through its menus. You can use your normal attacks. You have the option to do an aggressive attack that has more chance of doing more damage but more chance of missing, or you can do a lesser attack that will always hit but will always do less damage. You have magic, you have items that you can use. There's everything that you would expect from an RPG here in Shadow Madness, but if you were to compare it to the Goliath that is Final Fantasy VII, it's going to by default pale in comparison. But as I dove back in and captured some of this gameplay footage, I really got the memories of enjoying this game. Yes, it didn't age well, and a lot of people have probably not heard of it, or it flew under a lot of people's radars, or people just don't like it. But things like the combat and just the charm of it, I really like. That's about it when it comes to the combat of Shadow Madness. I don't think there's much more to touch on when it comes to the gameplay of Shadow Madness. It really is, if you were to dub it, it's a poor man's Final Fantasy VII, but I think it's a game you should try. Allow it to be a recommendation from me. It's just a charmful game that I picked up on a whim because I wanted some more Final Fantasy VII, and I ended up enjoying this game. It might not have the grandiose scale of a Final Fantasy or a grandiose scale of any of the RPGs that came out on the PS1, but I think it's one you should at least experience and try out for yourself. This game, Shadow Madness, did try to be Final Fantasy VII. It did try to capitalize on the success that Final Fantasy VII brought to RPGs in the late 90s, and if you didn't hear of it, a lot of people didn't, means it didn't do as well as it should have when capturing that moment. But people like me we enjoyed it, and I wanted to share that in today's video, and I'm hoping that you enjoyed yourself in today's video. So thank you for watching. Please consider dropping a comment if you have played Shadow Madness. Please, I need some people to talk about it with. I don't want to be on my own here, so I'm hoping that you'll drop a comment. If not, let me know that you might check it out or watch a few gameplay videos or something along those lines. But thank you for watching, and until next time, I'll catch you on the flip side.